All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We know you're here to level up your understanding to get right to the heart of a topic that matters.
Yeah, and today, that topic is, well, it's Maximo Manage, but we're going to be exploring it through a really specific lens,
Yeah,
the C1000-141 certification exam.
exactly. Now, we've got some materials in front of us, right? Some exam basics and even some practice questions.
Right.
But this isn't just for folks who are, about to take the exam.
Right.
We're using these questions as a launch pad, kind of like a secret decoder ring, to really unlock how Maximo Manage works.
Yeah, I like that, a decoder ring, because we're going to go beyond just the right answers, right?
Exactly.
We want to see the why behind, why does Maximo Manage function the way it does?
Exactly. And, what are the real-world uses for all of this stuff?
Absolutely.
So before we dive into the real meaty stuff, let's just for context, quickly touch on the exam itself.
Right. So the C1000-141, it's a 90-minute exam. You've got 67 questions to tackle. The passing score is 72%. And to sit for this exam, it'll set you back $200 US.
All right, so those are the kind of the official benchmarks, right?
That's right.
But again, even if you're not prepping for the exam, these are the areas IDM says you need to know to be proficient.
Exactly.
So let's jump into some practice questions. We've grouped these by theme. And the first one we're going to tackle is authentication and security.
Right. So the first question in this area asks, which authentication method is commonly used for single sign-on, SSO, in Maximo Manage? And the correct answer here is OAuth 2.0.
Oath 2.0. That sounds kind of techy. Can you break that down for us a little bit? Like, what does that actually mean for someone using Maximo Manage day to day?
Yeah, so think of it this way. Instead of having to remember a separate username and password, like a separate key just for Maximo Manage, OAuth 2.0 lets you use an existing login, one that you probably already have, like maybe your company's main login system. And what's neat is Maximo never actually sees your password for that other system.
Oh, okay.
It's like showing your ID to get in, instead of giving someone a copy of your house key.
That's a good analogy.
So it's more secure, but it's also more convenient, right? You don't have to remember a bunch of different logins.
Exactly. So it's win-win. Okay, let's move on to our next theme, which is all about how Maximo Manage, does the heavy lifting, automation capabilities.
Right.
And the first question here is about escalations. It says, what is the purpose of an escalation in Maximo Manage? And the answer given is to automate actions based on defined conditions.
Right.
Now, escalation, that makes me think something's going wrong. Is that the right way to think about it?
Not necessarily that something's wrong, but more like making sure things get handled right.
Okay.
Like in a timely way. So think of this. A critical piece of equipment breaks down.
Okay.
And a service request is logged in the system.
Right.
Now, an escalation could be set up to automatically notify a supervisor, right? If that request isn't addressed, let's say within 4 hours.
Oh, I see.
Or maybe it automatically bumps up the priority of a work order if it's been sitting there for too long. It's like setting up these automated reminders, nudges to make sure things keep moving.
So it's kind of like, it's almost like a digital assistant, keeping an eye on things, making sure that things don't fall through the cracks.
Exactly, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so that's escalations. Now, the next question about automation says, which feature in Maximo Manage allows users to create and manage automated business processes? The answer here is Workflow Designer.
Workflow Designer. This is where you can visually map out all the steps involved in a process.
Okay.
So think of it like a flow chart, but for how work actually gets done in Maximo. You define the different stages, who's responsible at each stage, what actions need to be taken.
So, okay, so like if we were mapping out the process of how someone gets a new laptop approved in our company,
right?
You could actually map that entire process, who approves it, who orders it, who sets it up, all in this Workflow Designer.
Exactly, yeah. You could define the initial request from the employee, the approval from the IT manager, the ordering process, the delivery, the setup.
Wow.
And what's really cool is you can even link those escalations we talked about right into these workflows.
Oh, I see.
So you could have a notification automatically sent to the employee once their laptop is shipped, for example.
So it's almost like the escalations are the specific actions.
Yeah.
And the Workflow Designer is the overall roadmap, the big picture.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Very cool.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on to our next section, which is all about integration and troubleshooting.
Right.
And the first question in this section says, when troubleshooting a failed integration transaction in Maximo, where should an administrator check first? The answer given is The integration message reprocessing application.
Right.
Now that sounds like a mouthful.
It is a bit of a mouthful.
Can you explain what an integration transaction is and why this is the first place to look if it fails?
Sure. So integration transactions happen when Maximo needs to talk to other systems,
Okay.
like maybe your accounting system or your inventory system, and data needs to flow back and forth.
Uh-huh.
Now, if something goes wrong, maybe the format of the data isn't quite right or the connection drops.
Right.
This integration message reprocessing application, it acts like a central log.
Okay.
It keeps track of all these integration attempts, shows you any error messages, and it often gives you the ability to fix things, to resend the transaction.
So it's like a control center for all of this back and forth communication that's happening.
Exactly.
Very cool. Yeah, we've got a question here about the Maximo integration framework, the myth. It says, which of the following options is not a valid reason to use the myth? And the answer is automating business logic within the application.
So this is like a what it's not used for question.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why is that distinction important?
Well, the myth, it's really designed for external data exchange.
So think of it like importing data into Maximo, exporting data out, connecting to other applications, handling different data formats, like XML or JSON. It's all about Maximo talking to the outside world.
Uh-huh.
But for automating tasks inside Maximo, things like automatically updating a status based on certain criteria or routing a record for approval, that's where you'd use those internal tools we talked about before, like the workflows, the escalations.
Got it. So it's kind of like myth is for the external conversations Maximo's having.
Right.
And those other tools are for the internal stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, let's move on to our next section, which is all about, the foundations of any system, data management and configuration.
Right.
And we've got a couple of questions here. The first one is about domains, it says. Which type of domain in Maximo Manage allows users to select predefined values for an attribute? The answer is ALN domain.
Right.
So can you unpack that a little bit for us? What's an ALN domain?
Yeah. So think about a field where you want to make sure everyone's using the same values, right?
Okay.
The priority at a work order. You might want to limit the choices to high, medium, and low, right? So an ALN domain, ALN stands for alphanumeric.
Okay.
It lets you create a drop-down list with those exact values.
Ah, okay.
So when someone goes to enter the priority, they can just pick from that list. No typos, no inconsistencies. Makes your data much cleaner.
Oh, that's super helpful. So it's really about making sure everybody's speaking the same language when it comes to data entry.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, next question. What must be done after modifying an object structure in Maximo Manage? And the answer is run a database configuration update. Sounds important.
It is, yeah.
Why is that step so crucial?
So object structures, think of them like the blueprints for how your data is organized in Maximo.
Okay.
Like how an asset is linked to its location and its maintenance history, all those relationships.
Uh-huh.
When you modify an object structure, you're essentially changing those blueprints. And so you need to tell the database, the actual system that stores all the data, about these changes.
Right.
That's what the database configuration update does. It's like making sure the foundation of your house is strong enough to support any renovations you make.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
So it's really about keeping everything in sync after you've made any structural changes.
Exactly.
Okay. Last question in this section. Which feature allows Maximo Manage users to perform bulk record updates efficiently? The answer here is list tab actions. Sounds like a real time saver.
It is. It is. Imagine you need to change the status of hundreds of purchase orders.
Okay, yeah.
Instead of opening each one individually, list tab actions let you select all the records you want and apply the change, whatever it is, to all of them at once.
That's awesome. So it's like a power tool for data management.
Exactly.
Very cool. Okay, our last theme from these practice questions is dynamic behavior and system health.
Right.
And the first question in this section says, what is the primary role of a conditional expression in Maximo Manage? The answer is to control field behavior dynamically. So what's so dynamic about these conditional expressions?
Well, they let you set up rules for how fields on a screen behave, right?
Okay.
But these rules, they're not fixed. They
Yeah.
can change based on what's happening in the system. So for example, you might have a field called reason for failure, and you only want that field to become mandatory if the status of a work order is set to failed.
Oh, I see.
A conditional expression lets you do that.
Cool.
Or maybe you want to hide a field entirely unless a particular checkbox is selected.
Right.
It's all about making the screen adapt to the situation, to the data that's being entered.
So it's kind of like making the interface smarter.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, last question. It says, which log files should be checked to diagnose system errors in Maximo Manage? The answer is systemout.log. Sounds like a behind-the-scenes kind of thing.
Yeah, it is, yeah. The systemout.log, it's basically the main log file for Maximo Manage. It records all sorts of system events, error messages, things like that.
Okay.
So if you're having a problem with the system, this is one of the first places you'd look to see what's going on.
So it's like the system's diary.
Exactly.
Okay, very cool. So on that note, this has been a fascinating exploration.
It has.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and, until next time, keep those questions coming.